Welcome, folks. This presentation is being recorded just for your information. We would like to be able to make it available to all those who registered, and for anyone who would like to receive it later, they'll just need to log in and download the presentation and John's and Scott's bio. He is Chief Technology Officer at Polymed, a company in South Carolina near Clemson, where John went to school and Scott went to school and got his doctorate degree with Dr. Shalaby. He's been involved with working on biopolymers for his career here of 10 years while at Polymed, and he put together a very interesting proposal to give us a talk at the Minitech in Anaheim. And unfortunately, because of work commitments, he had to run down to the booth downstairs and give the presentation, and we missed him at the show. So I've invited Scott to give us the presentation today in a more expanded form. So now, Scott, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And I'll go ahead and see if I can share the presentation. There we go. All right. Is that coming through, Lynn?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Well, guys, thank you so much just for having me do this. It was a disappointment to miss this back in February. And I do know, I mean, it's a fairly small group, so we can make this as interactive as you guys like to do that. So I'm okay with pausing, taking questions along the way. But really what we have today to talk about is something that has been in the works for a few years. As Lynn mentioned, I have been working with ASTM for about the last 10 years. And, one of the things that continually comes up is, how do we just improve the consistency and the messaging for materials that are used in medical devices. And so that's what this talk is really about. It's about a new standard that is in development. So it's not yet been approved, been issued. It is in development for a couple of years, specifically targeting medical grade polymers for non-implantable applications. So, okay. So, just to start with, the question is, in my mind, is very simple. What makes a polymer medical grade? I was trained, as I know all of you have been, that, for almost exclusively FDA doesn't approve materials, right? Only devices. So saying the term medical grade, what does that really mean? And the way we were trained is that medical grade terminology is primarily for marketing purposes. But is the term meaningless, right? That term meaningless. I think even though there isn't a standard definition, a lot of people in this area would say that it is bull butter if you don't think these words do carry weight. Right? They denote, as they should, it's a high level of quality and of safety, and then it is specifically targeted for medical applications. But since there is not a standard definition, then it is up to anyone who uses the word and hears those words to apply their own meaning. So it means something different to anyone who either speaks or hears those words. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to answer what makes a polymer medical grade and trying to convey some meaning with this word by creating a standard definition that hopefully is useful to medical suppliers and plastic users when they're making design decisions and manufacturing medical devices. So as introduced, my name is Scott Taylor. I'm Chief Technology Officer at a company called Polymed. And one thing, I will say, you can see that I do chair a task group specifically for absorbable polymers. We actually, in my role at Polymed and Polymed as a supplier, this is not even a standard that is specifically applicable to the work that we do. Our mission is to leverage absorbable polymeric technologies to manufacture medical devices. And this standard is specifically for non-absorbable polymers. So, but we sit in a very interesting position because we manufacture materials, polymers, and then we also apply those to medical device designs. We do downstream processing. We do lots of validation work. We do preclinical work, and we support fully manufactured sterile pack medical devices. So in that, we get to see kind of the full scope of medical device manufacturing, all the way from the raw material design and manufacture through the finished product. So it gives us a little bit of a unique perspective, just to help moderate the work going towards developing this standard. But fortunately, it isn't just me that is working on this with ASTM. So this work is representative of a large group cutting across both. You can see, many of the people here probably represented, their companies were represented, on this list. Other polymer manufacturers, suppliers, but also users of polymers, right? So Johnson & Johnson, Stryker, Medtronic, these are all important to consider, not just designing a standard from the supplier's perspective, but also incorporating the needs of the user when talking about this topic of what do we expect the words medical grade to mean for us in the plastics industry. Including that, we also have regulatory inputs as well. So FDA is a part of the conversations in developing this standard, and I do work with them, very regularly to make sure that we are not just setting a framework that is good for a supplier or a user, but also from the regulatory standpoint, that this will be useful, for anyone involved with the medical grade polymers. So we'd like to just start with the need, right? So what are we trying to do here? Why are we even attempting to take on this, rather weighty and complex terminology standard, right? So the call for standardization, as we've seen it, as I said, this has been a multi-year effort to this point. And the need for this has even predated that significantly. And what I see is very consistent needs in developing this standard is as listed here, right? So common language. We have different user groups, different archetypes of people that are working using the same materials, and they want the same things from this, is to create a high value medical device that is safe and effective. And so you have purchasers and users of the polymer, we have suppliers, and then we have regulators, and they all need to be able to speak the same language, use the same terms applied in the same way, so that we even just understand each other. The call for standardization also stems from the need to communicate clearly and manage expectations, right? So anyone purchasing a polymer never wants anything to change, but anyone manufacturing materials know that is impossible, to never change anything. Equipment goes bad, suppliers change, new risks emerge constantly. So we have to be able to manage those expectations and understand the risks of those expectations, specifically so that we can evaluate and supply high quality materials, for whatever application that they're being used for. And then when change does happen, that we can appropriately evaluate and manage that change, both be good purchasers, good users of material, but also be excellent suppliers of this material. So so that's kind of where we're starting from a foundation, the need, the call for a standard development. So I did mention, we do see this. There are a number of user archetypes that we see as impacted here. We know that these materials, it's not a simple transaction. There is not just a single polymer producer that sells to a single OEM, and that communication is the same, right? So we have producers, people who synthesize the polymer, right, that is ultimately used in a medical device. And that is really chemical synthesis, but it can also include compounding. Those things can be added. Chemicals can be added during chemical synthesis. But then also someone else may take that material and create a compounded part, right? Maybe they're adding colorants or radiopacifiers or some lubricant or stabilizer, right? So that is a very common thing to do. But I think one of the things here on this left side is that is still not a part. You don't look at that material and say, oh, that's a medical device. You can recognize that even a pelletized, compounded material as a raw material in need of further conversion. And then, the role of distributors. Someone is often in the middle of that producer as either a reseller or a repackager or a simple distributor to move that material from the producer to the ultimate user. But the thing that's unifying between all of these archetypes is that ultimately they're responsible for the chemistry. There's a polymer, and you can identify that material as a raw material polymer, right? So it hasn't been converted by extrusion into a fiber or molding or filming or coating into anything that looks like a finished device. Now, on the right side of this, these archetypes ultimately go to the OEM. So the one that is responsible for the 510K, their name is on the package. They own the design requirements for that. But we also don't want to discount the role and the complexity of using subcontractors, processors, injection molders, extruders, assembly shops that take those raw materials and turn them into semi-finished and ultimately finished packaged goods. So, basically, we've separated this out, and we have the people who are suppliers or producers. They're responsible for making the raw material as it is. And then on the right side, we have anything that takes that raw material and converts it into a higher value, semi-finished all the way through finished goods, and ultimately responsible for identifying the requirements and the safety of that device. So we know that they're ultimately responsible. So we're trying to take into account this full range of archetype when we're designing this standard to make it as useful as possible. And I see, this in terms of breaking this down into kind of 4 key pillars, right? So taking this from more of a first principles concepts. And I would say really here, look, any company that actively supplies medical materials for medical devices, even if it's a shared operation with non-medical, maybe some of their materials goes to aerospace or other industrial, lighter industrial, consumer grade materials. My guess is if you are actively making materials for medical devices, selling materials into medical device processing, you're probably going to meet the requirements of the standard, right? We want to set a solid bar so that new suppliers can become great suppliers, or bad suppliers can improve or decide that they need to exit, making medical devices more dependable across the industry. I'm also hopeful, I know anytime that we are talking with a new customer, we spend a lot of time in those early conversations just educating them on what is important about a raw material, right? And so this may be beneficial to help companies selecting polymers decide that they need to start with a medical grade material for medical device from the beginning, or at least understand the often higher cost of things that are medical grade compared to maybe more consumer grade plastic, right? I also want to address in this, we are polymer suppliers. There's a different expectation based on manufacturing scale that we have to address here, right? We're drafting the standard to be applicable to both the commodity, high throughput materials, as well as, maybe high performance polymers that are made at a single batch scale all the way through that, continuous large scale manufacturing, right? So it is a complex thing that we are trying to do, that we're attempting to do with drafting this standard. We have to take into account many different perspectives in doing this. So we have 4 pillars that we're trying to address: quality management, regulatory support, traceability, and communication. Quality management, right? we're not saying that ISO 13485 is a requirement. It's likely not even a possibility for many polymer manufacturers. But having an auditable and certified quality system does set a workable standard, whatever that standard is. So we don't want to dictate what system to use, but if you don't feel that your manufacturing operation can benefit from a quality system, maybe you probably should think about whether you should be a reliable medical material supplier, right? So, regulatory support. We need to be able to convey, and users need to understand what's in the product, make sure that it's consistent, make sure that it is supportable for whatever application, whether it's patient contact or not patient contact, right? We have things like SDSs. We have maybe some available biocompatibility, whether it's the USP standard or whether it's some elements of the ISO 10993. That regulatory support, we can be excellent suppliers and help someone make a decision to use our material based on supplying that. Traceability, also super important. This is really one of the biggest things from the OEM standpoint, that they really want to understand that they are purchasing traceable material, even if the level and the potential of traceability depends on the scale, right? Whether it's small single batches for manufacturing or if it's rail car scale from a continuous polymer engine, right? There's always potential for some level of traceability that can be supplied with those materials. And communication is also key, right? Communication really specifically around change control and communication around expectations for appropriate and controlled packaging. So these are all elements that we are incorporating into this draft standard. Okay, so goals. What we really want to try to do, we're transitioning what is historically looked upon as a marketing term, and we're turning this into a meaningful term, right? We're setting a standard to convey meaning, specific meaning that everyone can understand. Biggest thing there, we're creating that common language and the framework to manage expectations. And I know the slides will be available after this. By some mechanism, you can read the rationale that we provided for ASTM. I'm not going to read that, but there was a very specific rationale. It's essentially a rehash of the things that have already kind of described earlier in this presentation. Okay, so the standard. So we are drafting, and it has already been through a first ballot and in preparation for a second ballot. I do believe we're on a pathway to having an approvable standard that can be published by ASTM. This is the title. It is an ASTM standard guide for the criteria and classification of medical grade polymers for non-implantable applications. So it is not a standard specification, right? It's not a checklist of things that have to be exactly correct and consistent as many polymer standards are. It's more of a guide, and this speaks both to that setting expectations and communication. But there are a number of things within this guide that are more directive to basically minimum expectations for quality systems, change control, et cetera. And you can see some important aspects that are a part of the scope of this document. Again, we are making polymers for non-implantable devices. And you can say, Scott, why just non-implantable? Well, the same thing applies here, but if we exclude implantable applications, that means we can manage the risk down to a manageable level. So we don't have to consider the high levels of risk that include many more aspects of the ISO 10993 biocompatibility system. And additionally, most of those materials that are implantable already have their own specific standard. And this is more of a general guide that can be broadly applicable across industry, no matter what type of polymer is being produced. yeah, the goal is, whether it's within that scope or not, this is going to be useful. So just to continue on this scope, we want to address the need for materials that are safe, right? Safe for their intended application and consistent in their manufacture and supply. As polymer manufacturers, we are not responsible for the ultimate safety of the material in any particular product, right? But what we are, being relied upon is to provide a material that is consistent. And then the user of that, the person who owns the 510K or the PMA, it is their responsibility once they have a known material to assess the safety and provide FDA a rationale for why they think that material is safe. So we are still putting safety, the ultimate safety of the device is the responsibility of the user, the OEM, the manufacturer of the device. But as manufacturers, what we can do is we can be very consistent and we can be open about what is included in those materials, and we can manage change, and we can do lots of things to make sure that once they establish safety of a device using our material, that it will stay safe long into the future. Another thing here, this guide is limited to virgin grade resins. So we're not trying to tackle recycling in any way, right? I think a lot of the tenets will be applicable if someone wants to look at recycling. But again, just for the sake of simplicity, doing something that's a bit more manageable with this first standard release, we are limiting it to virgin grade resins. However, we're saying that these resins could be compounded. So it's basically anyone on that material supply side, whether it's the synthesis or the compounding, and it still looks like a polymer. We're saying that those have not yet been converted into a semi-finished or finished device. Those raw materials, whether truly neat polymers or just virgin grade compounds, would be included within this scope. Okay, so just quick summary, and what I want to say is, like other ASTM standards, this is going to be a voluntary standard, right? So we are developing this, and it will be useful across industry, whether you're a material supplier or a material user, and we want to help that relationship. But we do know ultimately, if we publish this and we do find it is useful, FDA may adopt it into their registry, just like they do other useful ASTM standards. So even though it will still remain a voluntary standard, the importance of this standard may be elevated, by something like that. And so, what we're trying to do is develop, basically a framework for evaluation. Even though as raw material supply, we know that a medical device safety is not guaranteed based on raw material, right? We cannot possibly determine as raw material suppliers whether a medical device is going to be safe or effective. But we know if you don't start with a good material and a consistent material, you don't really have much of a chance of making a high quality device. So we want to give OEMs a chance to evaluate well, to select the right materials, and ultimately to create safe and effective, high quality medical devices. This is a guide for non-implantable medical devices. And ultimately, we want this to be a framework for evaluation that suppliers and purchasers and regulators even rely on to identify materials and help in the selection of high quality materials to make the best medical devices. So I know that was a quick overview. We can go into some of the more specifics if you have questions, but I would like to open up to any comments, questions from anybody that is in the room.
Okay, I have a question. This standard that you are developing, what type of standard is a guide? Is a specification? Because this is really critical due to the intended purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a guide. right? Yeah. So there are 6 types of ASTM standards.
Yep.
Yeah, this is not a standard specification. I see standard specifications as being more material specific. There's a standard specification for PEEK or for ultra high polyethylene. This one is a more general, and it is designed as a guide. So more broadly applicable framework standard that can be useful for any material.
And the intention is provide just information.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So we are providing some baseline, like, if you are a good supplier, what are the things that you typically expect and want purchasers to know? And as a purchaser, also conveying the things that purchasers need to be able to, to use a material well and manage their device. Big thing is like change control, right? So what are expectations for change control? We're not going to say within this guide that you have to give a 2-year notice and last time buy, but we are suggesting within this framework that, hey, a last time buy and adequate time to test and manage the change from the OEM side is an important aspect of that supplier purchaser relationship. Right. So we're not going to be overly prescriptive, but the things that are important, we are going to try to at least address that they should be talked about.
Okay, then I have a second question, if it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Since this is a standard that is for non-implantable, which is the difference with respect the biocompatibility test? Because most of the biocompatibility test is for non-implantable, and then you have different categories, short-term, long-term, but all of them are already not implantable.
Yeah. So we are addressing as one component of risk within this. We are addressing biocompatibility. And I know USP has done away. They used to have USP class 1 through 6. That has now been rewritten, so there's only basically the USP class 6 that remains, and that's a weird standard for these polymers anyway. We are addressing biocompatibility, and typically, as a non-implantable material, many of these applications are going to include things like housings or things that may be on the other side of the operating room, right? So it's not just patient contacting skin contact, but it is inclusive of things up to like a short-term skin contact application. We are
including. For me, the confusion, or what I want to know is, already you have as part of the ISOs classification for surface device, extra communicating device, that they are already non-implantable.
Yeah. I mean, and that's biocompatibility, right? So we're not rewriting any biocompatibility standards. We're not setting expectations that there's a new biocompatibility panel that needs to be run. What we're saying is that, hey, as a supplier, biocompatibility is a thing that we care about for whatever application the OEM is using. And the OEM also cares about making sure that, if there is change, because there's always change, that they can evaluate the impact of that on their existing biocompatibility. Right. So, biocompatibility is only one component of this guide. And it's really just more about expectations, good behavior between the parties, rather than saying you need USP class 6 or you need, systemic tox or, irritation, sub-Q implant, any of those things with the 10993. Does that make sense, Georgia? Gregorio?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And Scott, again, thank you very much. We hope to have you stay engaged with us at various conferences. We know you go to the shows, West Coast, Midwest. Have a good evening and rest of the week. and we'll see you in August, if not before. Take care.
Awesome. Thank
See
you
you all.
guys so much.
Stay
Okay.
cool.
Here.